Good afternoon to everyone across the region. You are watching Territories Talk. I'm Ronn Grant out of Tortola in the Virgin Islands, and our guest today is the one and only Mr. Meshach Alford, who is the president of the St. Kitts Consortium of Farmers and Food Producers. Now, viewers, today we are going to be discussing, of course, growing fresh fruit and vegetable products, and also how the benefits of neighboring islands and partnerships could really help to advance the agricultural sector, not only for the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, but as a region, how we could come together and make sure that we're moving in the best direction. Again, I want to welcome each and every one of you from across the region, and I want to take this opportunity to welcome our guest, Mr. Meshach Alford. Mr. Alford, thank you so much for your time and welcome to Territories Talk.
I thank you for having me.
Indeed. Now, I mentioned, of course, that you are president of the St. Kitts Consortium of Farmers and Food Producers. But before we get into that organization and its role, briefly tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, I have been in farming, the field of agriculture, for just over about 10 years now. I've been working mostly in the area of crop cultivation and then recently moved into some livestock production. Recently became the president of the Consortium of Farmers and Food Producers here on St. Kitts, which is an organization that is just about 2 years old. And so we've been moving together to kind of bring farmers together under one umbrella as much as possible to advance the cause.
How would you say that journey has been for the consortium in the past 2 years in really bridging the gap between farmers and fisher folk in the Federation?
Well, we are a farmer producer organization primarily focusing on livestock and also production. We have not ventured yet, at least, to deal with matters to do with the fisher folk.
Understood.
The journey for us would have started, as I said, sometime late 2021 thereabout. And this was period just after COVID and the fallout from COVID-19, when farmers were having a lot of discussions individually, in small groups, unofficially. A lot of what we're doing is stemming from the whole notion of the whole concept of food security and what it means for people here, St. Kitts and Nevis and the region. And looking back at the initiatives, the policies and strategies over the last 30 odd years, we recognize that the same things have been promoted for those period of time, and there have been the implementation in that regard. And we were looking principally at recent policy measures to help to jumpstart the agricultural sector in the period of a crisis, post a crisis, which is COVID-19, and also reflecting on other crises in the region, which include storm activities which we get almost annually, and also looking at crises in the past, and how every time during these moments we often refer to our farmers, our agricultural producers, as the army in the fight for food security. But as soon as the crisis would abate, again, our direction, our attempts to improve the agricultural sector and production in the sector falls just the same time. And so the farm community, basically, and the consortium is looking at the state of the farmers, state of the producers, the island of St. Kitts in particular, and looking to see how we can truly advance the farming community by getting them more empowered, putting more power and control in the hands of the producer.
I'm happy that you mentioned advancing. What would you say it would take to advance agriculture in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis? What is needed from your vantage point?
But from the vantage point of the consortium, we have been pretty much concerned that the farming community has little to no voice in the decision-making and policy-making of the government and the Ministry of Agriculture. And this is spanning across decades. And so what we are saying is that the consortium on a whole is advancing a number of areas. One principal area is the voice. But when we started our discussions very early on at the inception of the organization, we thought it was important to dialogue with those who are in the sector as much as possible, which is an ongoing process because we're learning every time. We started speaking with the farmers principally, and they would have said, we have no say in what direction we are taking. Second thing that we would have identified is access to financing good credit facilities to help them to basically ply the trade a little bit better. They spoke also again about the marketing issues, not having proper domestic market for their produce. And one would say that, what sense does it make to grow something when you don't know where you're going to market that product? Nowhere in the world you will see that we practice, and it's not good business in any essence. And the conversation would have continued into the areas of infrastructure development, investments in those areas. Keenly also looking at the human capacity, developing our ability to, as you say, produce and gaining knowledge and new technologies being integrated in our operations and production systems. We also would have considered to a large extent our relationship with the Ministry of Agriculture, and that we can't be operating in silos, that we must be able to develop a framework of collaboration and not working in opposition to each other. And so you have to look at the institutions and the organizations that we are building and how much we are vested in organized production to meet the national and regional objectives.
Understood. One of the things that you highlighted earlier would have to be as it pertains to policy, and I'd like to, of course, input their legislation. At present, what are the policies and legislation that really govern the agriculture sector in the Federation?
Well, by and large, let's look at the policy framework a little bit wider, other than the legislation. There have been over the years, not only in St. Kitts and Nevis, but across the region, many policies and programs that have come about to basically improve production for the region and to reduce our import bill. And so many of the new initiatives we are hearing today are not really new. The source has been actually the same. In St. Kitts and Nevis, we've had various developmental strategies over the last couple of years, of the last decades, to see how we can also make those same kind of strides in the sector. When it comes to policy and legislation and so on to support the agricultural development in the region and in the Caribbean, I don't think there's a dearth on these things. Of course, you could always see how we could harmonize some of these legislation and policies. What is clear, even in policy and research documents and written reports over the years, and even most recently, the documents that were put together by the Caribbean Sector Organization, all do indicate that there is not a lack of programs, there's a lack of implementation, and the political will to administer on a number of these things. So, I mean, of course, policy and legal initiatives are good in terms of creating an enabling environment to ensure. Of course, from a legislation and regulation standpoint, we would like to start seeing measures as it relates to further incentivizing the sector so that you can have more private sector involvement, creating that environment that you eliminate a lot of the risks that are involved so that persons can be a bit more confident and motivated to get into the sector, especially our young persons.
I understand. Thank you for sharing. I have to ask you, as it pertains to the consortium, what is your membership like? How many members representing the agriculture field are presently a part of the consortium?
Thanks for that question. The Consortium of Farmers and Food Producers started off looking at more individual membership. And at that stage, we started off perhaps the conversation very small with about 10 major farmers, or more, 10 to 13 farmers or more around the island. We quickly moved to incorporate and involve a number of the farming societies, the organizations. And so when we do decide how we calculate our membership, we can go based on individual membership plus our collective membership, because we have presidents of various organizations who are sitting at the leadership of the consortium, and that is how it's structured, essentially. So there's a general membership and there's also the leadership aspect of it, which comes from different organizations. In our last count or so, we're looking at about 120 in terms of membership in the farming community, and growing, because up to yesterday and this morning, we're getting requests for persons to join.
Wonderful. I have to ask you, when it comes to farming, there is oftentimes a bit of a generational gap. And by that, I mean some of the younger persons within our societies aren't too keen on making this not only a form of livelihood, but essentially, I don't think many of them understand the importance of food security. Is it similar in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis? Do you have young persons who are interested in the field of agriculture?
Of course, you will hear the popular narrative now that farming is a business. It's been repeated and circulated every time the person's going back. I consider myself a young person, and I'm involved in agriculture. There are young members in our organization. At least about 25% considered youth, 25%, and persons who have shown interest. The entry into agriculture is not as easy as one would like it to be. There are a lot of constraints that are faced by anyone who wants to get into the sector to begin to fly and trade. Of course, there's a knowledge and the learning curve that they have to go around. And if you look across the region, you would recognize that most of the countries who would have ventured into local domestic production, they're technocrats, they're technical experts who go off to the regional institutes for learning, actually embedded in the agricultural departments and the ministries rather than applying the field, working practically as farmers themselves. And so there's normally that gap in terms of knowledge and technical know-how and capacity, and which makes entry into the sector a bit challenging for some persons, because by the time you start learning, you would have cost you so much already. That's why so many young farmers don't reach as far into it as they could. But there is a lot of interest. When I look at the last meeting of the consortium in 2023, just in December there, and I saw the persons who came out, young women, young men, are showing interest in being in the sector. You just need to get that measure of support. And that's what the consortium is really looking forward to see how we can begin to increase the amount of capacity development sessions so that farmers find it a bit easier to get access to the necessary information. One of the things also you would want to consider is that in terms of market information, when you're looking to do your own assessment as to where do you enter, what do you go into, we have a dearth, again, a lack of that information that is affecting us. And so, as I would sometimes describe, sometimes we're planting in the wind. We're just hoping after we plant certain things. And hopefully we can, in the near future, get some structure in place, some mechanism in place that can begin to provide that kind of market information that inform not only what we produce, how we produce it in terms of a guide, but also understanding who you're producing it for and who. And so that is also part of the problem that is affecting us inside. Land tenureship is a big concern. If you want to see investments in agriculture further, you recognize it requires that persons have a better relationship with their land, whether it's through longer-term lease arrangements or outright ownership, because it's an investment, and to start off in the field can take a bit before you can start seeing the returns. Yes. But no one wants to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars into a land area and they don't have any kind of true control over what they're investing in. So that is another area of barrier to entry that we are facing here in so many respects.
Understood. I have to ask you, for persons who are not familiar with the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, can you paint us a picture of what the local domestic agriculture sector looks like and feels like in St. Kitts?
Well, there's always the Ministry of Agriculture who has a particular mandate. Within it, there's a Department of Agriculture, which is where most of the technical aspects of the ministry resides. Normally, in that sector, you would have, in that department, you will have areas to do with livestock, crops, the engineering unit, different aspects of it settled where to provide services. There's also supposed to have some extension services as well, extended to farmers. And so there's also the veterinary side of things that advance extension service in that regard. There are a number of organizations, farming societies out there, including from the beekeeping, the poultry, and on that side, we also have different crop cultivation organizations and so on set up in that regard. Inside the Ministry of the Department of Agriculture, there is also a kind of marketing unit that is responsible for assisting farmers to getting their produce to the local market in some respects. And there's some recent work being done in that area. I've seen some progress there. The ministry would have certain installations out there, including the abattoir, where you take your animals to be slaughtered and processed. There's also projected a stock farm facility to be worked on and improved over time. And so there are a number of installations, or there are some outstations as well in the rural areas, at least two, one in the Tabernacle area and one in the Far East Newport area, which is more in the rural sites. The main plant for agriculture is actually the vast in the city area, in an area called Lagrit, right? And then you will have private entities who are involved in the procurement and the sale of inputs, the local hardware major stores and markets, and also you have also seed companies to help to support some of these things, right?
Understood. Now, when it comes to the support, you mentioned earlier on, the consortium really works closely with being a voice for, farmers in the federation.
Mhm.
Mr. Alford, would you say that the sector is being given the attention and financing that it needs from your local government?
We started a conversation, and it is a continuous one, as I said 2 years ago. We started a conversation because of the serious challenges that farmers are facing and have been facing. It's been difficult because there's a particular mindset that we know is not going to be easily changed or replaced. But we also understand that we have to be consistent and we have to talk wide, far, as deep as possible. And so, conversation we are having is not only with the Ministry of Agriculture and the Department of Agriculture, but also with the farming community, the banking fraternity. We are also meeting with the media persons and so on as much as possible because the narrative seems to be the same thing, as saying that farmers essentially are not consistent in producing. And even the reports and plans and policy documents and so on of the government and of other agencies speak in that fashion. All right. But essentially, there's always that perspective that is lacking, which is the farmer's perspective, basically presenting to you what challenges they are facing. It's been a difficult journey. But it has been one that has offered us much to learn because it's important to understand why persons make the decisions they're making and what is conditioning them. But we've come to that point in terms of our developmental thrust to note that we're going to have to not only lobby in
Mhm.
terms of moving from walking the halls of power as much as possible to bring attention to some of these issues, to make them understand that the organizations need to be brought front and center in the conversations we are having about these members, this community of farmers and producers. But also too, we are also much on the radio, in the media as much as possible these days. Because in order for change to come, there must be a change in the narrative and the understanding of what is the position of the farming community. And nobody is best suited to discuss the farming issues other than the farmer, him or herself. And so advocacy is part of our drive. Also, to networking,
Mhm.
reaching out to other organizations who similarly set up similar value systems and support and concerns, those institutions that have been involved long before we would have started, so that we can learn. All of it is a learning process, and we believe that we are on a journey. And so we are taking it in good spirit, regardless if it's good news for us or bad news for us. We are learning and trying to make that switch. But also to as I said earlier, how do we begin to develop our human resource? How do we develop the capacity of our farmers to continue to produce? It's very difficult, the conditions that are out there. So therefore, we must be able to link our farmers
Yes.
with those institutions that can provide that kind of capacity development. And so we have to also begin now to chart our own plan as an entity, our own roadmap as to the direction that we need to go in, especially starting in this new year.
When you look across the region, Mr. Alford, is there a particular country that you would say is leading or could be looked at as an example as it pertains to agriculture?
Well, most of what I see, and I don't want to speak with authority in that area. But most of what I see is mostly what I see in news items and what is posted in the social media platforms of the various countries and the organizations that they have. And some of the things are very inspiring. I have seen in recent article where it shows what is happening in places like St. Lucia, in Guyana, Jamaica, in terms of the investments already made to go after the target of the 25 by 2025. And for that reason, you become a bit inspired. At least the movement has truly started. We are yet to see that kind of turn in St. Kitts at the moment. We are hopeful. We have seen and heard the new budget presentations. We've been see like at least presentations of the 25 by 25 plan for St. Kitts. There's some there's buckets of hope in it. However, we're still waiting as we would normally do to see how these things will be rolled out and implemented, how much the farming community, agricultural community and a whole private sector will be thoroughly involved in these things from the very inception. And so in terms of identifying a particular country of sorts, I mean, up to recently as yesterday, I saw that there is some credit facility being devised in Dominica, right? To support farmers in the production of white potatoes. That is interesting to us because it's one of the things that we've been trying to promote with the Ministry of Agriculture to help us in that regard, at least to fashion or facilitate the conversation with the banking community. But one of the challenges we've been having here locally is that farmers are not considered. I'm going to speak of farmers. I know this sounds the same experience across the region, as they're not considered largely as being bankable. And so the conditions of loans and so on is sometimes very extreme to a point that you don't really want to basically incorporate those in your operation because it's too costly a financing mechanism. But when I see what I see in Dominica is also inspiring to say, here's an example here in Dominica that we've been talking about. This is one in St. Lucia, this is one in Jamaica and so on. And also too, these are things that we have been promoting because of our own experiences, noting that we need help in certain areas.
Wonderful. I want to take this opportunity to welcome our viewers from across the region. We have persons tuning in, of course. Today is election day in St. Martin, but today we are discussing agriculture and food security with the man Meshach Alford out of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Of course, if you have any questions or concerns or comments, feel free to send us a message and we will be happy to address them as best we can. Continuing on, as it pertains to the education in agriculture, I have to ask you, is it taught in your local schools in the Federation? What are some of the programs that are incorporated, if any, to introduce young persons as early as possible to the agriculture sector?
Well, personally, I am an agricultural student. I mean, going to primary school, high school, that was a subject matter that I'm always interested in. It was one of my favorite subjects early on. And so I know that at least from the level of the primary school, for most of the years, agriculture was in that program. I think even more recent years, it was inculcated in the curriculum of the local college. And so at least there are some measures and steps to ensure that persons are afforded that opportunity to learn it from those levels. So yes, there are measures there to do that. But I don't see, I can't speak with numbers in that respect in terms of the conversion over into the field. As I said earlier today, based on the reports demonstrated, even those persons who go up to these Caribbean institutes of agriculture, they most of the time they return to work inside of the ministries and inside of the departments as technocrats rather than farmers in the field. So I mean this is where you might see where the gap is, right? And so the technical knowledge that is the technical knowledge don't necessarily reside with the farmer at the level you might want, at least in the spread that you would want. And so most farmers actually learn the trade over a long period of time. You could imagine if they get some upfront training very early on, they could basically leapfrog in that regard.
Understood. Now, I am very familiar with the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, and I've had the opportunity to visit on many occasions. Give us some examples of the products agriculture products that are harvested locally?
Myriad
What are
of them. A myriad
yes?
of them.
Okay,
I could speak. Well, I want to pivot off of that question just to say something that I might have missed earlier.
sure.
Consortium of farmers having gone around having discussions with media, with bank, with the Ministry of Agriculture, the ministers, the Prime Minister, everybody. We learned that the real problem they had with the farming companies that we are not being consistent in our production. And that is
Mhm.
why a lot of times people won't find a market for stuff. Even though we disagree in principle on that matter, we decided to take a decision in our leadership meeting that we are going to start a planting program internally. This is where a number of farmers will come together and focus on different some crop items, particularly the bell peppers, the green peppers, we call it sweet peppers, carrots, onions. We also said we do some cantaloupes, honeydew melons, cabbages, and so on. So Consortium looked at around 6 different crop items to focus on for this crop season. And so, just to give you, this is about 6 of the 14 crops were identified in the 25 by 25 strategy for St. Kitts and Nevis. So we decided to tackle it in that way so that we can begin not only to record for ourselves, but have the marketing unit record what we're doing. So on our end, we're recording more on the production side, challenges, what we plan, how much we plan, how it's going over time, the challenges we're facing. And then also on the other end, the marketing unit is taking record of the harvesting aspect of things. The reason why we're doing this way is because at the end of the day, we would have set our targets and we want to make our contribution to the 25 by 25, even though most of us are not too clear on what this is. But we want to show that we are willing to collaborate with the Ministry of Agriculture and them basically trying to localize, which is a Caribbean initiative. But more importantly for us is to demonstrate to ourselves, demonstrate to the wider public and those who are having conversation on the subject matter that we can produce consistent. But during that process, we have to effectively keep our records and to demonstrate that during this period here, that not only were we not able to start the planting season on time, but we've now got an abnormal drought period as well. So those persons who are relying, which is majority of farmers relying on rain-fed agriculture, then you will see what the results are given our conditions, right? And so no longer are we going to just be talking off the top of our head based on our individual experiences. We're taking record of this and so on to assist us in our own individual and collective decision making, but also in our communication and conversation with the ministry to say, look, from experiential learning, we would like to suggest this, right? And hopefully we can come up with a better grasp in terms of authority on the matter. Now, we also understand, even though starting this planting program in September, very late, on the 22nd, which means planting actually started in October, before the rain started falling for us here. And then right after that, you find hardly any rain up until today, which is kind of strange, right? Now, we're recording all those challenges. And hopefully, at the end of our planting program, which is supposed to be a 6 months planting program, I think we're on the 5th planting for like tomatoes, sweet peppers, then we can be able to now get in the process of reporting on this in a real way. Now, we're doing this because we're not trying to make any kind of case towards the government, more so, we are trying to make a case for ourselves. Because right now, we believe and we have seen, and you asked a question earlier, basically to grasp what is the relationship like between ministry and consortium and the farming community. Is because we've reached that point where we recognize and we're hoping that the government can recognize that the farmers has to be able to not only be empowered, but also empower themselves and arm themselves with the necessary information and knowledge. And the greatest hope for us is that we begin to see farmers as truly business people to engage very early on in the processes. There's no reason why you will start a program, launch any program before you consult with the farming community. These are the people who are supposed to carry this program through. These are the implementers. And unfortunately, too much of our policies across the region, so we start at the regional level, and even at the national levels, do not incorporate those persons who have to carry it out. And there's always that gap because there's no clarity in terms of the vision, and it doesn't filter down far enough to those who are actually going to work and going to do speaks.
Understood, and I want to take this opportunity to thank you for your authenticity and your honesty. One of the things we sometimes fail to realize is that we have more in common as a region than we are differences. We have quite a bit of similarities, and of course, the aim of Territories Talk is really to connect the region through conversation. Of course, when it comes to agriculture and food security, it is of paramount importance and concern to the entire region. I don't see us, though, however, really taking it seriously. I don't see us really understanding the importance of moving from good to great when it comes to food security. And I do want to take this opportunity just to commend you and your organization for the work that you're doing in the Federation, despite, of course, of the various challenges. I want to give you an opportunity to speak to the younger generation, perhaps myself and younger. What would you say to them as it pertains to really bringing home the importance of getting involved in the agriculture sector?
Interesting question. When I got into agriculture, when I got into farming as a whole, it stemmed from an experience I had outside of the region. I was in South Africa at the time on a course of study. And I was there with my other classmates leaving the University of Aberdeen with our professor, very few of us. And we were studying the conditions. I'm an environmentalist and also physical planner, all right, by profession. We were studying the conditions of what you call it, the vegetation around farms and so on in that area. And we faced the region in South Africa. We were staying on a farm that had some semblance of tourism involved in it, where you could go there, stay, eat from the land, and all these different things. And we were basically assessing the area to understand what conditions are affecting the farmer from producing well. We asked those socioeconomic questions as well as and we look at the physical evidence of the problem. But we were on one farm and we moved to another farm, very 3 hours distance away in driving time. When we got to that farm, we were on a mountain. And I remember we were asking the questions, why? Why can't you produce the way you would like to produce? And I remember keep referring to the government and government policies and initiatives are bad. And I couldn't understand because he had so much land, right? We were on a mountain and the mountain was his land. And when I asked him, and I was a bit skeptical, I'm the only dark-skinned person in the group, coming from Scotland, and he was a white South African. But I couldn't leave that experience without asking the question. And I put my hand up like a child in a classroom, and I asked him, could you please show me the extent of your land? And he pointed to lands as far as the eyes can see, literally. South Africa you're in, and you see other mountains in his lands, rivers running through his lands, game, wild animals running through his lands. And he doesn't have enough land to do what he wants. That is where my concept, the value of land, changed in terms of wealth creation and everything else. And whenever we're talking about land here, especially in St. Kitts, who got access to a lot of their lands, individuals have access to lands very late, 4,000, 5,000, 10,000 square feet of land seem to be a lot of land. But when it comes to wealth and wealth creation and to create businesses and so on, and if COVID-19 taught us anything, is that we can't rely on some of these transnational corporations to keep us on.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see the amount of persons who are terminated or sent home during that period, one group of persons I know for sure wasn't so frightened was a farmer who had access to his land and was going to know how to produce and to create a business out of it as hard as the conditions were and now. And so the value of the land and what we do with it, everything as an environmental person, everything that you have in front of you came from this earth, came out of the environment. Whatever we produce, and whenever we produce nature. And so in St. Kitts and Nevis in particular, and most of us in the Caribbean who don't have oil and gold and precious metals and minerals, is soil and our sea is where we generate our wealth from. And so I would like to for the young persons who are considering anything going on, it doesn't matter what you're going to get into, real estate or anything else, you still come back to the land. So make sure early on to put your stake down. And starting with farming in my case, you know, I am far away from where I was when I started some 9-10 years ago. I started with very little knowledge, practical knowledge, of course, with some theory, but linked in with the elders. And I'm not saying old people, but with the elders in terms of experience.
Right. Yes.
So that, and they are willing to transfer a lot of that knowledge because they took a long time to accrue that knowledge, but they're also very willing to share it so that you don't have to go through the same things that they're going through. And, you know, basically try to incorporate your enthusiasm for the technology also in your production systems. Because it's not exactly what you think, the dirty, hard work, hot sun agriculture necessarily. There's so many opportunities in the field of agriculture. And that is why once I know persons who are interested in joining the field of agriculture, I can upgrade myself and invite them into the necessary conversation so that they can see where they can make their entry. Up to yesterday, a young lady, stopped me and asked me, you know, how can I get involved? I have this interest and so on. And you begin to have that conversation. And as much as possible, I try to encourage them to get involved. Because, again, it's also therapeutic. To work your hand in the soil is very therapeutic. Sometimes I go to my farm and I take off my shoes and I walk. They say that's grounding. I mean, you have to also find meaning in the things that you're doing. All right. And so I like projects. I love taking on projects. My farm is a project for me, a long-term project, but it is mine. Right? I can do anything else around this space. I can go into offices and do work anywhere. And I just like doing projects. And so my farm is a project for me. But also too, it is a source for my family. It's an opportunity to bring my family and get them involved. It's quality time. So then we only think of quality time in terms of being able to go to the movies and spend some time in a hotel somewhere. But when I have my brothers and sisters and my son on the farm with me, and I look around and I see my mother too, and her husband, you know, the whole family is in that experience. And when I see that, I know that I have to produce quality food, but they're eating shit from the farm. And again, these are the kind of things that, you know, inspire me. And I hopefully that a young person coming up, even if it's in your backyard, to start there, because that's where I started. I started by using old oil kits coming from the chip shop, pulling them with soil and planting with lettuce, simple things that can come in 30 days, cucumbers. Before I gravitated to put it on drip lines, I went and I studied on people's farms. I copied. This is not high school anymore where you copy and you get caught. Copy a system and go on it every time because farmers are even willing to give you the entire playbook anyway, right? And so this is where everything, and over time you begin to sit down and really listen to the elders on some of these matters. And if it's not farming still, please do something that is meaningful. But if not agriculture, something that is meaningful, because at the end of the day, life is short. Very short span of time.
I am so happy that you mentioned a meaningful, and on that note, I want to take this opportunity again to thank you so much. But those last words that you imparted are so crucial and very important. Whatever you're doing, if it's not contributing to the fabric of your society, if it's not building your communities up, then most importantly, that is where we'll continue to see a breakdown in the fabric of our society. But thank you so much for this amazing conversation on agriculture. We do have a question, and I'm gonna take that question. The question is from James Knight, and he says, "What can we produce? For what market are we producing, especially the local market?"
That is a good question. That is a question that the consortium has been asking. Unfortunately, in the region, and if you look back even as far back as the mercantile period, up until today, we have not had a good handle on our domestic market. And so, as I said earlier, I don't know if Mr. Knight was in at the time, a lot of times we're producing things just because we can produce it, and then we find we have so much on hand at the same time, and suddenly we don't have it.
Yes.
And it's because of market information, right? A lot of times, to answer the question about what can we produce, we can produce almost anything. The question is, should we produce it at this time, or should we produce it in an organized way so that you can meet the demand of your market and those of your neighboring islands? In St. Kitts, we produce a myriad of crops. We produce sweet potatoes very, very, very effectively. We produce watermelons, we produce tomatoes, and so on, right? And of course, we can do a lot better in those areas once we are properly organized and you have the institution and support set up and the financing to go with it. But there is no real limit unless there's an issue of climate and we're not, customer, we don't have the knowledge of a particular crop item. But most of what we eat, we can produce it, right? In the Caribbean, in the region. I remember when I was in uni at West Indies, one of the things that visiting guest lecturer told me that they had so many fruits and food just spoiling in areas like Dominica that never makes its way even up to the islands because of transportation issues and so on. But so across the region, what we can produce effectively here in St. Kitts, somebody else can. Like Dominica and so on. But again, production is more than just what we can produce in terms of what we have knowledge of producing and the guys produce, but it is a factor also of the infrastructure in place. Okay, there's something that my farmers constantly remind me that we can. Nowhere in the world is anybody producing the same thing all through the year. There's a period of time because of extreme weather pattern is a cutoff. But what they have over us in the region is those storage, infrastructure storage, so that they can buy themselves through a 2-3 months period while they pass through the extreme drought or this weather pattern of some kind, and then again move into production cycles again. Right? And so again, it has to be a real conversation about what it takes to really produce. One, you need to have a market to produce for. These are decisions, policy decisions that must be made, and there must be an exercise of political will in the first instance. The reports have indicated time and time again that there is no lack of programs. We have seen over 6 programs within the last 45 years or so in the Caribbean. But what we've seen is that there's a lack of investments as it relates to infrastructure, lack of limited financing to support these things. We have seen deficiency in the coordination and the organizing of the communities behind production. And we've seen a myriad of challenges over time. So it's not that we can't produce. It's that we have not yet really done justice to the implementation of some of these initiatives and so on, and provide the support where it really needs to be supported. And I think there is a kind of lacuna in the minds of our own people about our farmers and how they are, because we still have this dirty image in our head, this hard work image in our head, as much as we like to talk differently. Farmers are important when we have crisis. When we had COVID-19, we were the food army. When we had storms, when we had oil crisis in the 70s, when structural adjustment programs came on in the 1990s and late 80s, when we had the World Trade Center bombing and all these things, the media across the region and locally all were calling on farmers to produce. And for that period of time, we saw money became available, capital became available to stimulate production. We call them stimulus packages. But as soon as the boats start coming again, we see that there is no sustained program to continue this thing. The structural adjustment programs eroded, caused great government intervention in the 70s and early 80s. But then in the latter part of the 80s and 90s, we saw that it caused government to pull out of the involvement to offer extension services, storage facilities, and all these things that are necessary to advance and promote local production. Again, time has really come. Time has come across the region and I'm saying here locally in St. Kitts and Nevis, we can take the agricultural practitioners seriously. And let us put real policies in place, real measures in place. The talking, the grandstanding to say that you're going to make farmers millionaires, this has been happening across the region whenever there was a change in political government, right? But then when it comes to the will to implement, putting the institutions in place, the legal framework in place, the policies, the financing mechanisms, we've called here locally to set up a facility that allows farmers to get revolving loans at the start of every crop cycle and season. And to me, over time, these measures, these acts have been falling on deaf ears. But these are serious measures because you look as far as Asia and so on, persons raise their families for generations on these kind of schemes because they start the production cycle with an assurance that they will be supported financially. And by the end of the season, they would have paid back off these loans effectively to start again. Therefore, making access to food and food security real in their areas. But here, lip service, you're not seeing any serious organization, no serious participation. It's a consultation, but you need active participation of the farming community. In our instance here, in terms of organized production, we've seen a problem as well. As mentioned by one of our farming heads, that we've seen an undermining of the organizations that's here to support agriculture. And so right now, if we're not promoting the institutions and the organizations that enhances and keep the farming group together, then what are we talking about when we're looking for a productive force for agriculture? And so those are some of the things that really, jump out at me if we're going to ask whether we are truly serious about agriculture. All of the meetings we're going to, they're packed with non-farmers. They're packed with technocrats, making decisions, discussing, and so on. And sometimes when you get a chance to enter those rooms, you recognize they're talking to you with so much authority, right? As if they're doing it themselves, they're farming themselves, and they're telling you you're wrong. It is not so. But they're not practitioners, and you can't convince them otherwise. And again, you have to begin to open up these rooms. Farmers are knocking on these doors and say, let us in. Please let us in.
Understood.
Otherwise, I don't want to say what the next step is.
We have one final question that we're going to take, and this question is from Devron. His question is, how effective are the farmers with innovative and sustainable farming to advance their product, and what is being done to diversify the development of crops?
My experience moving around on farms in St. Kitts and in Nevis, just recently, my farming group did a tour on Nevis to see what is the difference between our systems and their systems. And in terms of innovation, there is an increase in the use of greenhousing on the islands, shade housing and greenhousing in terms of farm technology. And I've seen also the increased use of irrigation, especially on Nevis, the irrigation of farms even though the farms are smaller. And farmers are taking whatever measures they can in terms of other technologies, whether it's with the mulching plastics and irrigation lines and so on, to make sure they apply the trade properly. In terms of diversifying, I mean, the crops we are focusing on is what we have chosen in terms of diversifying from the traditional crops, in the first instance, like the coffee and the bananas and the sugar, which were export-oriented crops in the first instance. And so some of these crops that we are producing now is what we are trying to decrease in terms of the food import bill, right? And so we are promoting some of these things. So already that process has started for some time now. What we need to do in these areas is become more efficient in our production system, becoming more organized, and that is coming behind the same production goals and agenda for the season and so on. And of course, this will take leadership. One of the most essential things that is lacking in the agricultural sector is leadership, right? Sustained leadership. And despite who come or who goes, you're supposed to have mechanisms in place that keep this consistency, that the knowledge and everything is passed forward. But we are already diversifying. There's innovation in the agriculture sector here in many respects. I don't have enough time to give you the full litany of it. But as far as I'm concerned, even in machinery, I've gone on farmers' farm and I see excavators. I've seen large equipments to do what they're doing. The harvesters, you know what I mean? So that what would take you 2 days or 3 weeks to harvest in terms of potatoes is happening in one morning because they have the technology now so that they can and put them into storage. I see farmers now incorporating trending crops with storage, whether their farms are their place of residence, so they have ease of access. In fact, only one of the discussions in our group indicated that if the farmers don't have proper storage, if they don't have 6 months worth of supply before the farming season starts, you're already behind, you're already late, and you won't be effective. Second thing that they say to that is if you don't have proper storage for when you're harvesting produce, then you don't have to always go to your field to collect food to take to the supermarket. And you will take them from your storage place. Then something is off. And you should be going to your storage and not to the field to take food to the market. Because if you have to go to the field, you're already late again. All right. And so these are the kinds of conversations on not just the technology, but innovation in thinking and making your business file your operation, if it is such a word. All right. And so these are the kind of conversations we are having. Of course, our organization is very much open up to learning. And hopefully we can be able to network with agencies across the region that can help to fulfill some of that kind of technical know-how.
I'm so happy that you mentioned that because we have a question coming in from Faith Roach, and her question is right in line with your recent statements. It says, will the consortium seek to establish networks with other Caribbean regions to help alleviate the situation of glut locally?
We are currently reaching out using our friends in other parts of the region to connect us with other agencies. Because we must learn how other countries are doing things. We must learn from each other. And one of the historical problems of the region is that we've been isolated in so many ways, and that to take and everybody wants to be the first, the innovator, to say I did it and I'm the only one doing it. We're not that arrogant in the organization of the Consortium. We would like to learn from you, and everything that we can teach you, we can teach you. Because this is for the benefit of all. And so if I could reach out and get connection, for example, with the Barbados Agricultural Society, the Jamaica Agricultural Society, to help us to develop ourselves institutionally, so that we could provide better service to our members and to the wider community, of course, I run to that opportunity because we are that open, because we want to do better. This is our livelihood, right? And anything that we can do to enhance our members, we will do it. Right? As long as it's good in good standing. Right? But this is our part of our outlook. We indicated earlier that part of our mandate is to network. The 4 pillars I explained earlier when we started, that networking is one of those things, because we understand knowledge, best practices can be transferred, and so we must avail ourselves to those things. So any agency, whether it's an allied agency working here in St. Kitts and Nevis, or regionally, or any institution set up to support agriculture at any island or whatever, even if we have to come to be students in your rooms, we will go. And that is the basic philosophy and understanding in the organization, right? And hopefully one day we could return the same to other institutions and non-persons.
Wonderful. We have a number of persons who have been logged on to this conversation from across the region. One of those persons happens to be the Junior Minister for Agriculture and Fisheries in the British Virgin Islands, Dr. the Honorable Carl Dawson. We want to thank him for joining this conversation and paying attention to the narrative. We have a number of persons, as I said, from across the region. Antigua, Bermuda is here as well, Cayman Islands, Turks and Caicos, and of course the British Virgin Islands. And we do have persons from the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. So once again, welcome to Dr. the Honorable Carl Dawson, Junior Minister for Agriculture and Fisheries in the British Virgin Islands. Mr. Alford, I have to ask you, as we wind down the conversation, we just have a few more short minutes before our time is up. But in 2024, in hindsight, with all the work that the consortium is doing and all the efforts that are being made, what would you essentially like to see for agriculture across the region? What is your goal and your essentially your prayer when it comes to agriculture?
So the last part of your question was missed just there. What is the goal for agriculture across the region, our vision?
Essentially, what is the goal? What would you like to see um, done for agriculture in the region for 2024? What is your ultimate prayer for the industry?
You see, all of the developmental literature, starting with the works of even Arthur Lewis and them, have indicated that there is no true economic growth in the region where you have one sector moving ahead of agriculture. Whether it was industrialization or whether, as we are speaking in these days of tourism area, that if you advance one at the cost of the next, then you won't have real growth across the economy as a whole. And the reason for that is very simple, because even if you're going in one area, globally, food cost is going up sort of fast and increasing rate. And so my goal really essentially is to see greater investments in the people, in our own people. Because a lot of times we focus on these shiny things. In the 1970s, it was referred to as those white elephant projects, right? And so if you see a white elephant, you know what it is. You see projects come along for a moment, and they are supposed to be the panacea. They're supposed to solve all of the problems, like tourism in our case. But we see what happened with COVID, and tourism got shut down and everything else. But we have to rely on in terms of our people. And so for effective and sustained economic growth and for poverty alleviation to really happen, it must be about food security. And if it's going to be about food security, then those persons who are on the front line to produce the food, they must be invested in. We must not be afraid to invest in our own people, because all of the tax holidays that we've given some of these transnational corporations, some of them even take loans from our local banks as well, and many of them has fell under as a result of bad management and other practices over the region. Our farmers and our people still remain. And so we've been trying to inculcate our people into industries, and nothing is wrong with going out to services and tourism and so on. But it can't be that we are pursuing a unilateral economy, but we have to pursue dual economy. Farming must be center, because if you're talking about the liberation of property, then growth in food production is a must. Therefore, empower the farmers, empower the fishers. In St. Kitts and Nevis, there's basically only few persons that are being productive. Most others are administrative. It's not me who says so. It's the reports of the region by the private sector organizations. When you're looking at my country in particular, if you're looking for productive, you're looking at the fishermen and the farmers. Maybe you're looking at the caribous and maybe the industrial estates up there, but most of those industrial estates companies are not from here, right? And so if you're going to make real investments and see real growth, then you have to start with the lower class. If you raise the lower portion of people, then everybody get a rise. And so I would really like to see that investments in agriculture, in terms of the infrastructure, starts happening. I would like to see better linkages, forward and backward linkages in the agricultural sector. I would like to see better clarity in terms of the market and better connections in the own domestic market, and change that age-old paradigm. I would also like to see that we are setting up mechanisms to make sure that we are financing our farmers and our producers very well, and to take away that age-old stigma by implementing these things. Incentives must be made available, just like when we make incentives for these large hotels. Incentives must be made. To date, we're still having problems to get them to put things in place to make duty-free on things like our chapters and so on. I mean, this not being high science, right? If we come out of a COVID period, for example, and the chapters on the island, the chapter on the island If 90% of them are down and they ask for assistance, incentivize them so that we start production. And that's one of the reason why our production here is so late, right? Because we had our private sector persons basically in a state jacket. And I'm hoping tremendously that we are not just placating and making statements and attending these meetings, but when we come back here, there's no real will to implement them. I hope that we can empower the farmer, put power and control in the hands of the farmer and the producer and our entertainers and our cultural experts to make sure that we're producing local.
Wonderful. Meshach Alford, I want to thank you so much for your passion and purpose as it pertains to agriculture. And of course, we here, the consortium, as well as the farmers within the very best as you continue to forge forward with this very pivotal industry. I also want to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of our guests from across the region for tuning in. It has been an absolutely meaningful conversation, one that I'm sure we will have to continue because this is of paramount importance to us. I have been your host for today, your guest host, Ronn Grant, out of Tortola in the Virgin Islands. Again, you've been watching Territory Talks. Thank you all for your time. Do have a beautiful rest of the day, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.